Hello.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I am well, thanks. How you doing?
Oh, probably better than anyone's ever been.
Oh, well, that is to be excellent.
Set the bar high.
Okay. I just have to ask, are you, I can't really tell, is that an injury or is that,
It's, I put a temporary tattoo of a sunflower on with the kids last night, and then I slept on it, so it's kind of smeared off now, but it does look like I got a rock in the forehead or something. Why don't we talk about what TIKKUN is, if that's how you pronounce it?
Yeah, sure. So tikkun is repair or fixing, and in the Jewish sense, it has like a very big context. So it's usually they say tikkun olam, which means healing or repairing the world, fixing the world. And so it's sort of the main task at hand for the Jewish religion. But the way I kind of spin it is it's also tikkun hanefesh, which means the repairing and fixing of the soul. This is really it's a both and.
So it's got a kind of it's got an ethical and political angle to it, but it's also got an existential and maybe also a psychotherapeutic angle to it.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So when you treat it personally, how is that used? I mean, I read something you wrote, and it seemed like it was like a practice where you can leverage what's going on for you in a moment.
Yeah, right. So it's I mean it's used as a context for personal work, personal development, personal healing, and using the events, interactions interpersonally as fuel for that, as fuel for that kind of healing and repairing work.
Okay, so how does that work? I receive signals from someone that I find to be distressing. Now, what do I do?
Okay, so if you find yeah, well, first it's the biggest thing is to pause, to take a breath, to connect with your body, to create space between the stimulus and your response or reactivity. Generally, when something's triggering, we react, and when we're doing this work, first thing is to create space between the stimulus and our reaction and hopefully response, and then kind of just check in with the self and see, like, what's being touched here. Is this being touched because it touches something deep inside of me that's connected with my wounding, right? With my trauma, with my childhood attachments, with something that happened to me deep in the past. And that's sort of I would say there's kind of like the spiritual angle to this work is to realize that the relationships we have and the triggers that come with those relationships are not the universe kind of spitting in our face in a way. It's the universe lovingly giving us an opportunity to heal something that's yet to be processed. And having kids, as you will know, you have endless opportunities. They have a particular magic of knowing exactly which chords to press, which buttons to press, which keys on the piano that are out of tune to keep going at. And we're like, why are you doing this to me? This is right. But when we pause and take space, we can see, like, and we have this framework to use in relation, then we can see, oh, this is the universe showing me the places that I still need to grow, the places that are not yet integrated in my own self.
So with that pause you have, and the notion that you have this opportunity in this moment, you've still got to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So what are the supportive conditions that make a person able to actualize a choice out of that framework in that moment?
A real commitment to doing the work. I think it's the biggest thing. Once we have the framework and we have layers of support, which is, I would say, crucial, essential, then it's really the commitment to keep showing up. And then, you know, when we screw up, not if, when we screw up, to you know, come back and make that tikkun, you know, go back to the kid, go back to the person who triggered us and we reacted in a certain way, and make good on it. And yeah, I mean, this has much broader lens too, which is in regards to, you know, the collective trauma, and kind of seeing our place in the world and how we got to where we are, and maybe who got hurt in the way of getting to where we are, and again trying to make repair and tikkun in that way, so that it has this very personal interface and has also this much larger collective interface.
How should we think about the healing of collective trauma in a way that isn't just healing the trauma of lots of individuals? Like what's the actual independent collective aspect of that?
Okay, yeah, right. Instead of thinking about it as healing many individuals who are part of a collective, you're saying, like, how do we think of it as, like...
Yeah, do you think of it as having this other aspect? Like, if I was going to think of, hey, I'm going to heal collective trauma, as if it was that easy, would I just try to heal the trauma of many people? Or is there some other way where I would approach the collective dimension directly?
Good question. Yeah, I think it's both. And it's really in a moment to moment. It needs to be super practical. So it comes out, and, you know, in when I host groups where I am, for example, and you'll see this a lot nowadays, which is a good sign to me. People really are honoring the land that they're on, and honoring the indigenous people who lived here before. So I think in one way that's a beginning of that movement,
right?
That's a beginning of honoring the collective, honoring that something's happened that's not cool, that I'm here, I'm an occupier, I'm of the privileged class, I'm an extension of a colonialist movement, and I want to honor that. I want to honor that this isn't my land, that there were people here before me. And in that honoring, I think that energetically has the beginnings of an impact on that collective field. But it's a big question. I would say I don't have a lot of answers to it. I think it's one that I'm really living into and asking and trying to learn.
Sure. I appreciate the sincerity of that.
Yeah.
So TIKKUN is part of your work, and I guess I'm curious about how you've come to feel like there's a future for a full spectrum spirituality anchored in, Jewish psychotechnologies.
Yeah. Well, this is it's good. We'll just drop right into the meat of it, right? I was just before we got on here thinking about, one of the things that I do with my work in evolving Judaism and Path of Tikkun is that I really love the tradition. I love that I'm Jewish. I love that I have these roots of tradition that go back and that are part of me. And so even though I have a very humanist perspective on life, that I take myself as a human first, I feel like it's part of that whole transcend and include model, is to transcend the sort of ethnocentric roots of the religion to embrace more of a world-centric and cosmocentric perspective. And to do that, it takes updating the lineage, honoring the lineage, but updating it simultaneously. And so that's a lot of the work that I do is updating the lineage, and I do that through reinterpreting the stories. So as an example, directly related to what we're discussing, right, is the Garden of Eden and these two trees. If you're familiar with the story, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, tree of knowledge, good and evil, and the tree of life. And spirits tells us not to eat from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, right? And as good humans, as humans are in their way, they do what they're told not to do, which is just part of our. It's not a mistake. It's built into our genetic coding. And we eat from the tree, and then we're banished. So much of the Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, is based around the garden and this story and these trees, and it sort of sets up the blueprint for why we're here and what we're here to do. So for me, the kind of understanding of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge is that they represent both light work and shadow work. Which is again the work that I do with people, is embracing the light work, which is the recognition of our innate divinity, the unity and connection between all things, the great mystery that connects us all, transpersonal, and then the shadow work, which is this personal work. And so the way that I see the tree of life is that it represents that unity consciousness. If they ate from it, they would have been infinite. They would have lived forever. That's kind of the story. And that's the work that we're meant to do on that plane. And then the tree of life, knowledge, is the shadow work. It's the work of embracing our individual story, our individual histories, and doing the TIKKUN work, the healing work around that. And so really it's about these two selves that we're looking to integrate into one. So as a personal example, when I was 20, I had a really profound awakening experience, and I was sort of bridging the unity consciousness, infinite dimension with the body, but I wasn't bringing along the ego. I wasn't bringing along the self. The self was in the way of this transcendent experience, and that's an issue, because we need the self relationally. We need the self in the relational field, and so I was outside of that, and so I was only doing one side of this TIKKUN. I was only doing this tree of life part of the TIKKUN. I was recognizing my innate divinity, but I was avoiding this self and the traumas and the woundings related to the self and the history. I was evaporating that. And so to me, that's only a one-sided path. And I think a lot of my understanding of the Eastern traditions is that it is that sort of one-sided path. You go for nirvana, drop the body, all of this is illusion, come to the true self, Atman, you're that. But in the Jewish path, it's very much a householder path, and it's the integration of the two, right? So through my own work and through my relationships, especially with my partner, I came back down into the world, and I started going into the shadow and started doing the tree of life, the tree of knowledge healing. And so that's one way to, sort of long way to answer the question in terms of like, updating these narratives, these stories to make them relevant to now and the work we need to do now.
So what do we make of the divinity's advice not to eat from the shadowy trauma descending tree? Is that just an expression of our reluctance, or is there a piece of good advice which is maybe they weren't ready or something like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it was a setup, to be honest. It was just a setup, like it's kind of like, don't do that, and then what you're told not to do, you naturally you gravitate towards doing, and that's kind of just the sort of setup.
This is to zoom out on that a little bit, the relationship between growth and healing is really intriguing, right? And they're both very present in your work. So one has this developmental, future-oriented unfolding, and then there's new things. So then when you're dealing with healing and repair and trauma, you're dealing with the past. But how are they related? Like, is it necessary to heal in order to grow, or can those things happen independently of each other? How are they related?
Yeah. They're two sides of the same coin. Really, they're totally interrelated, healing and growth. Like I said, like there was growth on my part through stepping away from my story, through rising above it, transcending it. There was growth there, but there wasn't healing. It's interesting. I just wrote a post about this, that transcending trauma is not healing trauma, right? So you can transcend it, you can rise above it and get relief from that trauma, from those woundings, plugging into the spiritual dimension or other things. But you're not necessarily healing it. And there's growth, there's movement, right? You're learning about yourself, you're growing, you're changing. But you might not necessarily be healing those parts that are unprocessed from the past. So there's a need to go into the past and to look at it and to heal that. And I think that's a big part of you just named our culture, like growth, rapid growth, healing not. Right? Like because we don't want to attend to the past. I think that's the difference between the kind of survivalist mentality, which is just like, I am the future. Let's just keep building. But we don't look at the foundation upon which we're building everything. And if the foundation is rotten because it's built upon oppression and wounding, trauma, we don't it's going to be shaky and it's going to collapse. So, great. I really like that distinction between growth and healing.
Yeah. What about the other way around? Like, if you heal, do you automatically transcend and grow? Or what would you still have to do in order to transcend and grow, even if you've healed?
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, yeah, like you can go and do therapeutic work, right? And you can heal. And I think by default, you'll grow through that. But you won't necessarily grow spiritually. Well, I think you will too, because I really see the two as interrelated. But you may miss a larger context within which the growth or the healing is taking place, and you might miss that, if that makes sense.
How do you and your work relate to people who come in from, say, an ethnocentric perspective on Jewish mysticism?
I see that as, you know, as just a movement of stages, right? Like there are people in red, there are people in purple, there are people in blue, and so there's a place in regards to that. You know, I have personal stuff that gets triggered and activated because I grew up in an Orthodox, very blue community and culture, and so I do get activated when I hear, you know, certain ethnocentric perspectives, and I have to tune in the moment to whether or not it's appropriate or worthwhile to try and address that in any way, depending on who it is, depending on who's around. It's completely situational.
As an evolutionarily oriented humanist, what future is there in terms of thinking about God? What kind of a God is valid going forward?
Love it. Yeah, I was thinking about that. You know, part of why I didn't just go off into the fully humanist kind of realm, like Krishnamurti was like a big influence for me in the younger years, and really sees religion and the concepts of God as the downfall of humanity. And the reason it didn't just go that direction is because I don't see religion going anywhere anytime soon. With over half the world's population believing in God, believing in sort of ethnocentric perspectives on God and religion, it's not going anywhere. So I don't want to fight against that. What I want to do is, you know, more like Ken would say, around using the conveyor belt, right? The conveyor belt model of giving options for updated versions. So I think the current concepts of God are going to continue to be around for a long time. But if we can give next stage of those an evolved stage rather than where they got frozen in so many ways, but go right in and kind of give updated versions for kind of next stage development. I think it's crucial. It's wild. I mean, obviously I don't know what's gonna unfold, but I think there's going to be a sort of return to God from people who have left God, and I see that already as in signs of like sort of the medicine culture, ayahuasca culture, is kind of like a lot of people who have left, you know, become secular, but then find their way to this medicine, and then this opens up their consciousness back to like tapping back into some forms of God and purpose and spirituality. So I think that's going to definitely continue. And I think just like the concepts of God are just going to continue to be updated. That's my hope. That's what I see happening too.
So, what about for you? What's your concept? When you think God or you think spirit, what are you thinking of? What is it like?
Yeah. It's really a great mystery. Yeah, it's the place of awesomeness and wonder. Like it really comes through, and when I just sit with, you know, the non-dualist ask, you know, who are you or what are you, as that kind of main mantra question. And for me, the big one is where are you? where are we? And that where are we really, to me, opens up a dimension into seeing things with a different lens, with this lens of wonder. Like, what is this place? What am I? Where am I? And going there, I touch into this, great mystery and deep place of deep wonder, that, all these things are here, and how amazing and beautiful it is. And to me, that really is God. And that's the place where I see God in me, and I see God in you. I see God in everything and everyone, because everything that's here is sacred, because it's, where the fuck did it come from? Like, where did all of this come from? And that, and the cosmos and the infinite nature of the universe is all, to me, God.
So, a sense of pervasive awesomeness that appears when our location is contextualized as a mystery.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very nice. So, integral theory is a meta model. It creates a large map out of types of perspectives, right? And a number of different people have tried to make these really comprehensive maps now. And then there's this other side, which is like a more experiential way of people making super maps, where it's kind of I saw the number 7 and it reminded me of this. And at the same time, my cat came into the room and here's what cats represent. And right, they're making a very personal, super connected map. And somewhere between there is traditional super maps like Kabbalah. I don't know it very well. I played around with the 10 orb maps a little bit when I was a kid, but I'm not very well versed in it. What's your take on Kabbalah as an inclusive map of the types of reality we can experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and not exactly sure how to answer it. I see the it's also called the tree of life, the 10 sphirot or orbs, as more of a kind of the architecture of how the universe came into being. That it came in from a place of this, the top sphere of total unity and oneness, just pure light, infinite being. And then it's really a map of how from infinite being we come down to finite reality. That's more how I see that map. And a lot of the Kabbalah that I study is the process itself of how there was a movement from infinite to finite, and then within that is also sort of the roadmap to go back up the tree, in that regard of making TIKKUN, getting back to the garden, as it were.
I wonder if you see a connection between the phases of that journey and the states as discussed in integral thinking, because at 10, we're sort of in the gross realm, and the top 3 are kind of the infinite, the structure of infinity, and in between are all these sort of subtle state possibilities.
Yeah, I think there could see a connection there. It's interesting, right? The states and the 10, the bottom of Malchut, as being the gross realm and the kind of sort of mundane state of consciousness, and then It's also related to in Kabbalah the levels of the soul as we rise from the lower level of the soul up through the 5 different levels of the soul is different state consciousness, right? And getting closer to the top is that that place of unity where there's only one. But the difference is that when we go back up from the human realm, we maintain the individuated self. And a lot of Kabbalah, that's sort of the purpose of creation, actually explained in that way, which is that, you know, came from infinite being down to finite consciousness, finite reality, so that we can, you know, well, let me say this first, that we existed in a way in that place of infinite consciousness. Same way as we existed in the garden, but we didn't have clothes, right? We didn't realize we were naked. We didn't realize we had a self. We were part of the unity, but there was no body. They say that they had light bodies because they were just infinitely connected with that consciousness. And it wasn't until they ate the apple from the tree that they realized they were naked, meaning they realized that they were separate beings. They had bodies, they were different, separate form of creation. And so really being cast out is saying, okay, now go out into the world and do the work of TIKKUN so that you can go back up to this tree of life and come back to the garden, but this time get there with an integrated, individuated self. So you have you're both, you know, that's what I started with, the union of those two selves. You have this realization of the oneness, the unity of all existence, simultaneously with an individuated self. And obviously it's a paradox, but yeah, that's the point.
Does it serve a function for the unity to have us go and get a self and come back? Does that do something for it?
No, the unity is not impacted. The unity is the unity. It's for us. It's just for us. If it's hard for me. I'm wary of going to that place where I give the Godhead, that infinite consciousness, any kind of human character trait of like wanting to give. But the literature, I'll just say the literature does that. The literature says God did this so that you can have the most awesome experience a human being could possibly have. That's why God created this.
He's not training helpers. Who do you read Jewish mystics? And if you do, who's really impressed you?
I would say one of the main sources I study is called Yehuda Ashlag. He's known as the Sulam, the ladder, and he did a commentary on the Zohar, which is the most known esoteric text in the Kabbalistic tradition, that tries to unpack in a mystical way the Bible, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. And so he really created a model that was more palpable and more relatable, not kind of like off the earth, but very much about this work of healing and tikkun. So he's one of my main go-tos in that regard. I mean, there's a lot of great scholars and rabbis from the past who've written really beautiful works. A lot of them, and a lot of Kabbalah, I would say, is kind of very out there. It's not something you just sit down and read and it makes sense. It's very cryptic. It's meant to be cryptic, but Ashlag, for one, really kind of demystified a lot of it and put it in the Kabbalah center. That's from Ashlag teachings, the one that Madonna was into, and the whole thing. Philip Berg, but yeah, I'd say he's one of my main go-tos.
How important is work in intimate relationships when it comes to our own spiritual development and when it comes to healing the planet and healing the culture going forward?
It's all there. It's all there, right? Because that's the whole thing. Because in a transcendent model, there's no relationship. It's just a relationship between God and God. And so, nothing's happening, nothing's real. It's just oneness. So everything that happens in the interpersonal realm is not real. It's illusion. But in a model that is, I would say, a grounded model, and in a Jewish model, it's all about interpersonal relationship, because that's where your shit comes up. That's where all the unprocessed material from the past comes right into your face, right? I was able to avoid all of that by being in the transcendent realm of so I would say now pseudo non-dual consciousness. But when you come down to earth, you have to make a living and you're in relationship, and especially if you have children, then everything comes to the surface. All the work of the tree of knowledge comes to the surface. All of the trauma of your past that has been unattended to, unprocessed, unmetabolized, comes to the surface. And there's the work, and that's the work of the world. That's the work of healing the planet. That's the work of getting ourselves out of the mess that we're currently in. It's all in relationship. It's all in interpersonal relationship.
How do you, what's the distinction you're making between non-dual and pseudo non-dual?
Well, I think that I would say, if I want to agree with the possibility of a non-dual consciousness, I would say it's more of the integrated self. It's the integration of those two selves, the infinite soul and the personal ego identity, connected all the way back to the tree of knowledge, right? All the way back to Adam and Eve. That whole movement is really the movement of time and interpersonal relationships. To me, like, I am a product of all of them. So if I'm doing my healing work, I'm healing all the way down the line. And so a real non-dual consciousness is one that has an integrated self that's done that healing work and is individuated, is vibrant, is in the world, is in the body, isn't like this sort of dissociated guru type eye gazer. It's a individuated self, healthy, vibrant, with the infinite consciousness as part of it. And the pseudo non-dual is just the one sort of the transcendent, dissociated place.
The one that maintains the duality between non-duality and duality.
Exactly.
Okay. When you were saying that, it gave me an image of, ancestry and all the way back through the phases of emanation of the cosmos, and the idea that if there can be healing at each of those steps, then something passes from that source all the way down to us, and that's the energy that can then pass back.
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah, I really like that image. Yeah.
What does the Jewish tradition have in terms of prana or chi, or an additional spiritual or life-friendly energy force, whether real or metaphorical? Or just how do you relate to that possibility that comes up in a lot of spiritual traditions and practices?
Yeah, prana and chi. I think it's that I mean it's that emanation of spirit that's within all things. It's the great mystery. It's the light or the energy that is touched when we open to the awesomeness of being here. If I just breathe as as this limited consciousness, this limited self, versus if I take a deep breath of awesomeness, then it's quite different. And there's an energetic quality of difference to that. And I would say that that's, personally how I would relate to kind of prana and chi, is like breathing that in, gathering that in from that place of opening to that. It's kind of like the subtle energies, the God, the light is always here. It's just, and we're breathing always, but it depends on how we relate to that breath, how we relate to that oxygen. Like, is it like, oh my God, oxygen, how phenomenal is that there's oxygen? Like, there's no oxygen on Mars, right? Like, holy shit, I'm breathing, right? It's like, it's that, and that can fill us with a lot of life force.
The danger of conversations like these is periodic expansive mindlessness, which makes it hard to carry on a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does a better world look like if people successfully make tikkun in themselves and between themselves? Where does civilization start to go? How does it start to change?
Yeah. Well, to answer that, I'll touch back on this. So this place of interpersonal work and shadow work and trauma healing is absolutely essential, in my opinion, because I find it to be kind of this like mass in the way of accessing the world we know in our hearts as possible. It's like a blood clot. It's a tumor. It's in this mass of cells that have been growing and growing. And on the other side of that is what's possible. It's a beautiful world. It's a interconnected, loving, tolerant, not even tolerant, but nice, embracing of individuality and diversity and difference, celebrating it and working together to in a cooperative way to create, to build, to live in beauty together, and to address injustice, and to create systems that directly address injustice and create more equality and interconnectedness for all. But like I said, this mass of trauma is in the way of that. And currently my experience is that so many of us are numbing because of that massive trauma, right? So we just numb out on Netflix. We think survivalist consciousness, getting through the day, going to work, making ends meet, and then we just numb out. And I would say that one of the biggest maladies that we're facing as humanity is the capacity to take our lives seriously. The capacity to. We don't currently have the capacity even to take our lives seriously, meaning to realize that every action that we do has significance, that we are incredibly powerful, beings. So it's like numbness, the world that's possible, and in between is this trauma. And the problem is that most people don't have neither the resources nor the technologies to know how to metabolize and face that trauma, which is why we numb out. It's just is too much on our hearts.
So what are the tools to handle that? How do we heal shadow and trauma? Obviously there's a lot of psychotherapeutic traditions, and some of it's in the integral community in terms of detecting our reactions and dialoguing with them and then trying to identify with them. But what else? What are the other tactics of overcoming shadow and trauma?
Yeah. Well, the therapeutic domain is huge. It's essential. And I'd say the other main realm is the work, right? It's yoga, it's Tai Chi, it's bioenergetics. It's really the realm of the body and getting back into the body, because our trauma is locked in the cells of the body. And so, that's why maybe you've experienced, or people have experienced, like when you do certain yoga postures, all of a sudden all this emotion wells up. It's because you're accessing a place in the body that trauma has been locked up. Unfortunately, there's not like the awareness around that, and then the support to process that. It's just like next posture, right? Just like moving through the flow. I think it's going to be the technologies of yoga and more body work, body-centered therapies are going to come more online as things develop, because it's locked in there. And that's a lot about somatic therapies. It's actually doing actions that reflect movements we couldn't do in our childhood, like pushing out and saying no. Like that was something that we weren't able to do as kids. So it's like just doing that movement, with my clients, and when I have them do that, some of them are like, oh my God, like I can't do it. Right? Like something is getting access there. And so just doing that movement starts to build those muscles that have been atrophied. So body-centered therapies, voice, singing, music, art therapy, a lot of these different modalities are huge in accessing. And I think there's just a lot that's still to be created, especially around the collective trauma field, which is, I think, very newly coming on the scene as like, oh wow, we need to address this. This is huge.
So expressive actions that bypass the limit that's associated with the trauma.
Yes.
What's the role of humor in all of this? Because humor has an element of transcendence to it, and also the Jews are famously funny people.
Yeah, humor is so important. It's so important because it brings that lightness and levity into the intense, overwhelming task that we have at hand. And so I would say it's quite essential. And to be, obviously to be aware of when we use humor as a bypass, which a lot of people do. Like when we're getting too close to something edgy, when we're getting too close to something triggering, we'll crack a joke to kind of, dissipate that. And that can be dangerous because then we don't actually touch it. So humor plays a role, but I would say in its right, in its right form. Yeah.
I find something funny about the Old Testament.
Oh
right?
yeah.
My observation of my favorite Jewish characters, who are very often people I've seen in comedy, stand-up, things like that. I have them in my mind since I was a child, and so when I read about Abraham arguing with God, I kind of picture a humorous character, a certain
SNL.
self-aware, neurotic, energized, funny person.
God, come on. What are you doing? What are you doing over here? Right.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing because a lot of religions don't have that tradition of arguing with God, of that being a pious relationship.
Yeah. No, I mean that's huge, right? It's not God is infallible and um, makes always the right decision. No, no. In this regard, in this kind of God, God makes mistakes and can be challenged. You can say, "What are you doing? What are you thinking? Why are you doing this?" And I think that's a big, yeah. It's important. It's important to again also access our personal power and in relation to being, you could say co-creators or co-evolvers with spirit in a way. Um, so it's not just like, okay, whatever you say, you're the big man. I'm just gonna bow and follow along. I'm a yes man. But it's no, there's a real I love that. There's a real relationship. It's a relational process. Like we sit down at the table and we talk it out together.
You mentioned Krishnamurti earlier, and I wonder who else were your sort of galvanizing spiritual heroes or philosophical inspirations?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I mean Ram Dass in the beginning, Be Here Now was so profound to me in that, you know, transcendent journey. And Krishnamurti, I got into Gurdjieff, if you're familiar with Gurdjieff at all.
I'm actually quite familiar with Gurdjieff.
Okay, okay, great. Yeah, so really got into the work and into a work community in Western Massachusetts, and really loved that framework. Yeah, but also again, so this is another place that's interesting to look at because it's that kind of framework too that causes a lot of arrogance. It causes a lot of like, you're asleep, I'm awake. We're right. There's a truth to it, right? There's a truth to we're in the matrix. There's a truth to like we're all asleep. But a lot of times it can get that, in an unfortunate way, it can get to that place of like, oh well, now I'm awake and you're asleep. And then when I do that, not through working through my stuff, actually now I can't. There's no relation. I can't actually relate to you with any empathy. It's just this like, I'm up here, you're down here kind of experience. But and there is a lot of I still feel a lot of truth in the structures of mechanical living and the real I and the unification of the eyes. I really appreciate Dick Schwartz's work of IFS, internal family systems, as a therapeutic modality in regards to that. I think it addresses a lot of that, the sort of bifurcated self and trying to find a unified self, right? Which is more here, right? Which is more here. But the therapeutic work and the shadow work is essential to actually fully being here, in my opinion. So yeah, Gurdjieff. And then yeah, I was into a lot of the non-dual teachers, Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta. Actually I was in the ashram in India for a little bit, many moons ago.
He has a tremendously fun name to say, Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Yes.
It's like the other one I like is Tiruvannamalai, where Maharshi lived. I just love to say those words.
Tiruvannamalai. Yes. Tiru. Yeah. Yeah. Or, well, the A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. How about that one?
That's right. I'll buy any book with that written on the cover.
Let me tell you. I'll tell you another thing I
Please.
think you'll appreciate. So I think a lot of the work that I do is also in the realm of, when I say kind of updating Judaism and Jewish spiritual practice. It's sort of recognizing sort of the mythical realm of it and taking it to an alchemical realm. And there's that movement of its roots and sort of the mythical realm, and then seeing and moving it to an alchemical realm. And I'll give you an example that will help. So kosher, right? Everyone knows that's not kosher, right? Or it's kosher, right? And it's become a pop culture word. But the roots come in through the Torah and the guidance of which animals you can eat and which animals you can't.
Yeah.
And so you can take that on a mythical level, right? Which is like, God said you can eat these and you can't eat these. If you eat these, you're good. You're going to go to heaven. If you eat the wrong ones, you're fucked. You're going to go to the other place, right? So that's the mythical realm of it. But if we want to sort of update these models and update the narratives, then we can try and take them to the alchemical realm, which means to look at them as more of a template, as what it means to have right relationship with what we put in our bodies. And not just what we put in our bodies, what we put on our bodies and what we put into our homes. I'll clarify. So when I think of kosher in the alchemical realm, I think of being in right relationship with spirit, right relationship with the earth, right relationship with people. And so I want to eat something that's local, that's organic, that's not full of pesticides, that's not created from mass pharma industry, that treats its workers with kindness and etc. Right? So that's really like a template for right relation with what I put into my body, versus Coca-Cola, which is kosher, right? But is not necessarily good for your body. I might even go as far as to say it's toxic for your body. Sorry, Coke drinkers.
So, local, organic, ethically produced bacon.
you could go there. You could go there. I personally don't. So that's where I'm like, I'm in this in between place. Like I don't go there. I don't know. That's part of, like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that being part of this sort of genetic imprint in me, that like pig is still on the no-go things. But it's not really. It's what's more important is what you said, is the local, organic, ethical, and that goes to any product, right?
It's a virtue alignment in your consumption.
Yes,
Like
a
that.
virtue alignment in your consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about, I'll just take it one level further. If you think about in terms of some of the questions around religions working together and the future of that, and if you can imagine, this is something I get really excited about in the idea realm, is like, if you can imagine a certification that is halal for Muslims and for Christians, and Jews, kind of all coming together to say, hey, let's create this certification for different products and start boycotting other products that aren't ethical, that aren't, following along the virtues that we as religions are trying to live by and manifest in the world. And so you could see that kind of collaboration. You could see the impact on the world of production in that regard.
That's a neat idea. If you could assemble a group of people who would create a certification that served different religious traditions, but also served the maybe emerging religious tradition that wants to be free range and cruelty free and organic and ethical, and because that's a kind of sacramental designation of its own.
Yes, exactly.
There's when it comes to Gurdjieff, I know a lot of people, or a few people, let's say, who are concerned that the fourth way tradition has been overly influenced by Uspensky and by certain conventional modes of thinking, and has all these habits that don't really show up in Gurdjieff as a character or in his actual writings, and that these have become conflated and maybe led to a stultifying result. But one of the things that shows up very strongly in his writings is this notion of taking in different kinds of food of impressions, food of energy, food of. So how do you think of kosher in terms of impression food? What's good impression food?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's the same, right? It's like, well, there's two things I would say on that. Like, one, it's the same as like high vibe food, right? That high vibe food is like, fresh, local, organic, full of vitality, full of nutrients, not zapped and sucked the life out of it. So that's high vibe food. That's kosher food. When I think of impressions in the Gurdjieff sense of it, it's the other thing about touching God, right? So when I touch the spoon to bring the food to my mouth, that's the first impression, is the metal on my hand. And if I'm in my body and I'm relating to my body and I'm relating to that instrument as a spiritual tool, as full of the awesomeness of life, then I'm taking in that energy. And when I breathe, I'm taking in that energy of the oxygen and the prana, like we said. And when I smell, I'm connecting to the awesomeness of what is this scent, right? To the mystery in it. And when I eat, and I'm actually eating the food, right? I can be getting the energy just from the food if I just gobble down food, or if I'm bringing conscious awareness to it, then I know I'm eating God, right? And that knowing I'm eating God is bringing an energy into my being. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm thinking of a part of it, but I'm going to kind of go on a weird tangent to get there. The notion of safe spaces is frequently discussed in terms of like being safe for the ear. Like I shouldn't have to hear things that are upsetting, but there has to be balanced out by safe spaces for the tongue, which is I should be able to say things safely. But then there's a reverse of that too, which is I have a responsibility to say things in a way that's sort of clean, but I also have a responsibility to hear them that way. Right? When a word comes in, I have to remember not to take it simply as a reactive association to its worst possible connotation. So there's this dialectic between good food as impressions and good receiving of impression food. So, what is it that I can do when I receive things to make those things more kosher? And I kind of think this relates to the TIKKUN moment. If an obstacle is coming up, how can I receive it properly? How can I eat it in a way that makes it cleaner?
Yeah, beautiful. I love all of that. Yeah, and I think you answered most of it in what you said. But what I'll add in terms of Yeah, it's exactly that, right? So when the neighbor comes at you with something that, you know, triggers you, and you want to tell them to fuck off, but you take a breath and you create space and you relate to what they might be going through, you know, what traumas might be active in the way they're speaking to you, um, and you create that space of relation. You build a bridge of connection with them into where they are, what might be happening, give them the benefit of the doubt, which is a big Jewish teaching. But at the same time, you don't make yourself small, right? Because there's a possibility there where you just make yourself small to their communication. So you have to find this dance between holding your boundary, being strong inside yourself and your own needs, tuning into where this communication is coming from, trying to locate the sort of vibration of trauma they may be influencing it, and then find a way, yeah, one, not to take it personally. I mean, that's so huge, right? Don't take it personally. And then sit with it and find a way to respond in a direct and loving way, direct, compassionate way. Yeah, I mean, it's so beautiful. All the things you said about, the words coming in and the safe space to speak and listen, right? I think about that in terms of my partner has a tendency to have a gravitational pull towards tragedy, and it's connected with her own history, but she'll oftentimes want to share that with me, right? And she'll want to share that maybe at like 11 at night, or and to me, I feel like, that's actually, it's I mean, this is a little bit is an exaggeration. It's violent. There's an abusive quality to that when you do it without asking permission, without asking permission to bring something into the field that I might not want to touch, right? But people can use that, and I see, clients struggling with that, with their partnerships. People use that as an excuse to not ever engage in things, right? Like, oh, I don't want to deal with that, so don't attack me with that. So we need to really be balanced and see when we're using that as an excuse, and when really it's, there is the right moment and the right container of agreement to go into things, and knowing when to say no, when to say no, I'm not open to receiving that right now. Let me get back to you at another time that feels more appropriate for me, where I've prepared my nervous system to receive, whatever it is that you have to share.
Yeah. I was very proud of myself when I learned to say, I'm full. I can't take any more in right now.
Yes.
There's a famous historical tension between Jews and Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you see as the prospects for a collaboration of the wisdom traditions? What's the future of the esoteric relationship or the spiritual relationship between these traditions going forward?
That's such a beautiful one, because that's to talk about going down the line, going back into history, right? Like there's a tikkun to be made around the casting out of Ishmael, right? I mean, the Jews and the Arabs are brothers. They're brothers and sisters. We're Ishmael is the line of the Arabs, and Isaac is the line of the Jews, and Isaac and Ishmael are brothers, and from the same father, different mother. But I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like repairing that divide, going back and repairing like that. This is such a perfect example of how ancestral trauma is in the genes. It's in the cells of the body. Like that trauma is in the cells of the body from that movement in time. And so in order to repair it, we need to go back in time and really address sort of that root. And yeah, and find the places that we are aligned, right? Go to the places where we do see eye to eye, that we are serving the same God, that we're wanting the same outcomes for humanity of peace and connection, of righteousness, and to come back together. And also notice that, how politics and political movements have used this early wounding to divide us, deeper, and that we can't let those political movements get in the way of our reconciliation and our healing and our collaboration. Easier said than done. I'll just say that.
What's next for you? What's coming up? What's on the tip of your tongue? Where does your work go next? What's your next phase?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I do this counseling work with people who are looking to embrace the light work and the shadow work and heal in a more holistic way. Continuing to do that, and within that, building model of larger structures for this healing. And continuing to evolve my platform of Path of TIKKUN, which is these teachings of the sort of updated model of Judaism and Jewish spiritual practice. Yeah, working in those realms, building bridges with other teachers, with other models, my own continual personal development, and learning of other models that are helpful for this work. Yeah.
Nice.
And raising 2 kids, which is the huge central part of my personal tikkun and healing of the future. The more work I do on myself, the more present I am for them, the less baggage they bring into the world, into relationship. So, and same with work with my partner. It's all integral.
Well, that seems like a pretty nice place to end. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything that we haven't gotten into that you'd like to touch on?
Let me say one more thing, which is I do see Judaism as a sort of possible future similar to Buddhism in regards to, like, you don't need to be of Asian descent to practice Buddhism. There's spiritual technologies that are available for any human being wanting to achieve the outcomes that are set forth in that practice. And I think the same is true with Judaism, that Judaism has spiritual technologies to offer anyone, any human being, wherever you live, whatever faith or not faith that you are, which is why when I do things, I always welcome non-Jews. It doesn't matter to me. So I think one of the biggest gifts that Judaism has to offer is Shabbat, is the Sabbath. And now more than ever, do we need a Sabbath? Do we need a time to unplug? And I think, there are different ways people practice the Sabbath, but I think the most fundamental the most fundamental way that's most relevant to our time is to really unplug from technology, unplug from screens, which we are, I'll speak for myself, fully incredibly addicted to. And as a way to really take a break and come back to body, come back to earth, come back to relationship, come back to those places that we know in our hearts are really important to us. So I want to just put that out there. You don't need to be Jewish to have a Shabbat practice, and it doesn't have to be on Saturday. It could be on Sunday. It could be on whatever day of the week you want. But yeah, encourage people to unplug. It's an epidemic, the screen addiction. It's numbing us so incredibly to our power, to taking our lives seriously, to finding that energy to make change and to impact the world around us.
Well, it's been very nice getting to know you, Gavriel. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Thanks, Layman. Yeah.